with what's coming because it's a little.
Making it real, what we know about identifying local needs and assets. On the call with us today, we have Margie Legowski from the Corporation for National and Community Service, Judy Nog and Dave Dunlap from Veterans Helping Veterans Now from Colorado, and Debbie Ellis, Jerry Ann Abel, and Nikki Martin from Education Northwest are here to do the logistics for our WebEx. Thank you all for joining us. We have about 200 people that have registered for this webinar. So when you guys log in and get into the audio, your phones are muted so that the background noise is limited. But please, we like to get the chat messages from you guys. We edit our chat messages as we end our recordings, and we save them for you on the Knowledge Network. We get a lot of wealth of resources in this chat from all our other webinars. People have included great information about programs and resources that are applicable to the topic at hand, and those are actually as important to us as some of the things that our presenters have said. So we would encourage everybody to use the chat panel and to comment to all participants so everyone on the line can hear you or see what you have written. Thank you. At the end of our session, we will have an evaluation for you, and we would love it if you could fill out that evaluation. We are doing these monthly or sometimes twice a month, and every piece of information you give us will be used for making these webinars better for you. With that, I'd like to go to the next slide. And it just shows who's on the webinar today. Like I said, we have quite a few people registered. This slide was done about 3 days ago, so we've gotten about 20 more people registered. But as you can see, we've got both veterans and military family members as part of our audience. We have people from 45 states and the Virgin Islands, and we have people representing all program areas. In the other area, we have people from American Red Cross, several people from higher education, people from military, Veterans Administration, and looking through some of the attendees, we have people who focus on working with children, working with homelessness, health and wellness. So you can probably find yourself identifying with many of the attendees who are on the call with us today. With that, I would like to just jump right into this webinar and introduce Margie Legowski from the corporation and have her give us our official hello and welcome from CNCS.
Great. Thank you so much, Debbie. Would you be willing to switch to the next slide, please? I'm in the Office of Leadership Development and Training here at the corporation, and I work very closely with Kobe Langley, who is the Senior Advisor for Veterans and Military Families and Wounded Warriors. This webinar today is actually the second in a series that illustrates the findings in the Veterans and Military Families assessment that was conducted by the corporation over the past year. Last week, or in May 2nd rather, we did a big picture overview which is available for you on the Knowledge Network. And today we're going to dig down into identifying local needs and assets. From here we're going to move into looking at performance measurement, and then finally the last one in the series is going to be about using an evidence-based approach for your work. Next one, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. At the end of this time together, we would like you to have some new strategies to add to your veteran and military family toolbox. This is really around program design and program redesign. We also want you to be able to apply what we know about strong military family program design to your own program. So we want you to have some strategies. We want you to be able to apply what you hear today from our presenters in the work that you do. Next slide, please. So the first question that we're going to take a look at is why identify local needs and assets? One of the things that we learned from the assessment of national service programs is that people struggle with this question, and I think probably the most important word in this phrase is local. Sometimes people leap in with a great idea and forget that There may be someone else doing it in their community, or it might be something that really the folks who are supposed to receive it may not need or want it at all. So basically, we identify local needs and assets because what we're trying to do is find existing resources and assets or strengths in our community or the people that we're serving, to learn about what people need and what they want, to identify gaps in the services in our communities, to avoid duplication, and basically to build support for your network. Next slide. So in other words, it's really a way to demonstrate and document the known needs and assets of the community that you've identified that you're going to serve, whether it's a particular population or a geographic area. And then it's a strategy for involving others in problem solving and goal setting. It's based on the idea that we ourselves don't have all the information, as I know that all of you know because we've all been in this for a while. Next slide, please. So how do you identify local needs and assets? First, I'm going to describe generally the process, and I suspect this will be familiar to you who have programs in place or who are thinking about designing programs. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some specific strategies. After that, what I'm going to do is turn it over to Veterans Helping Veterans Now, which is one of our VISTA projects that's based in Colorado, so you can see and hear what some of these things look like in practice. So again, why we do it? We do it so that we can document a need, which we can then address within our program, and also to engage the community and the people we're serving in problem solving and in the program design and development. So how we identify them? The process is simple on paper. It's basically learn. You want to learn. You gather information, you analyze it, you review your capacity and resources, whether you can do anything with this information. You ask yourself whether it's something that's within your scope or if it's something that requires much more money and many more skills than you possess. You use the information to design or redesign your services, and then you begin again. So basically, it's a process of learning, gathering information, analyzing the information, reviewing your capacity and resources against what you have learned, using the information to design or redesign services, and then begin again. It's a loop that goes around and around during the course of your program cycle, program year, and actually your nonprofit's work as well. There are specific ways to do this, and I'm going to ask you in the chat box to share some of the things that you've done to gather information about veterans and military families or veterans and military families in your particular area, because some of you are working in communities, such as Veterans Helping Veterans Now. Some of you are working in states, perhaps through your state Joining Community Forces Network, and some of you are working nationally and have programs operating in more than one state. So what I'd like you to do, if you can see the chat box on the right here, there is a section that you can type in your idea and then press send. And what I'd like you to do is send us what you do to identify local needs and assets for your program when you start it up on an ongoing basis. Basically, what we're going to be talking about here is listening, using existing data from a reliable source, and it could be a federal, state, or local reliable source, statistically reliable. You can survey a sample of people to get a sense of the overall community rather than surveying everybody. You can look at your whole community or population and survey a representative sample. You could interview, survey, or meet with what we refer to as key informants, the folks who are the decision makers or the knowledge bearers in your community. However that looks in your community probably differs from some other community, okay? Use existing data, survey a sample of people, interview, survey, or meet with key informants, hold a community forum, which would be a much broader group of people, or hold focus groups, where you would have a protocol in place and you would listen to folks talking, but you would also record that and replicate it in other situations in exactly the same way with the exact same questions. Okay, we see some good suggestions come up here. We've got a suggestion from Sharon, who talks about a community needs assessment committee that meets once per quarter. I'd be interested in knowing who's on that committee, Sharon, because one of the things that we keep in mind when we do identify local needs is what's the purpose of this whole process? Who are we attempting to inform, influence, or persuade, and what might they need to hear or know? Whose needs are being assessed, and are those people being involved in the process? Do you already know the answers? And finally, how the information will be used. So just to summarize that, we identify local needs and assets because we want to be able to demonstrate that there is a need. We want to be able to demonstrate the scope of the need and the intensity of the need. And we want to be able to solve or address the problem that's underlying that need. We do that. We also want to engage the folks in our community in problem solving and in addressing the issue. So those are the reasons we want to do this. And we do it by gathering information and listening, by analyzing the information, reviewing our capacity, and using the information to design and redesign our services. And then we begin it again. It's a loop. It's also something that may look different in different communities, and it's usually best to do more than one thing so that you can, be sure that you have a well-rounded picture of what's going on. You're listening to either a representative sample, you're gathering information from a reliable source, a reliable data source that is, you're interviewing or surveying key informants, you're holding a community forum, or you're holding focus groups. So bottom line, you are learning and you're listening. Okay, so Debbie, can you read some of the examples that are coming up in the chat box? This is great, you guys. I want to tell you that we also will be sending out this chat box to folks. Excellent, okay.
Olivia said that they do a community needs assessment that's sent to RSVP volunteers and their volunteer host agencies coupled with their community partners. Their RSV Advisory Council member met monthly to review the community needs assessment and what changes need to be addressed to the program.
Thank you. And Ryan has talked about through his American Red Cross program that covers a 5-county area, which is something where you probably couldn't do a public forum unless you did it in individual counties. You probably would do focus groups or key informants, and it sounds like that's what you've done here by reaching out to the military, veteran service organizations, and to veterans themselves. Okay, and we also have someone suggesting they've used Facebook as a source of information, seeing what supports exist locally and nationally. I've seen people use web-based tools like SurveyMonkey or Doodle or other Google documents to try to send out surveys either by email or through the web. We have someone who's partnered with military units to survey military families who attend Yellow Ribbon events. I'm glad you mentioned that, Janine, because what you're showing is the purpose of the partnership. It's really to help you to access people and to provide you with expertise that you may not have already in-house. And again, we work with other nonprofits to find out what services they offer and how we can work together. Great, these are great examples. Keep them coming. Good. Okay, well, let's go to the next slide. And the reason we're here today is because we wanted to give you a sense of what this might look like in practice. There are many different ways to collect information. There are many different ways to use the information. We asked Veterans Helping Veterans Now to join us because they're going to share with you some of their work in this area, and they're also going to talk a little bit about the role of a veteran in recruiting other veterans and reaching out to other veterans. So with Veterans Helping Veterans Now, we're going to be looking at their overall program. We're going to ask Judy and Dave to talk about how they use needs and asset mapping for their program on an ongoing basis. And then at the end, we're going to ask Dave to talk a little bit more specifically about his experience as a VISTA and building the capacity of the program. let me start with Dave. Dave is a VISTA who works in Veterans Helping Veterans now, and he was a Marine Corps infantry rifleman from 96 to 2000. He has an associate's degree in outdoor education from Colorado Mountain College and a bachelor's in psychology from Colorado University Boulevard. He's worked with Outward Bound, and it was during his work that he actually began to think about pursuing a master's in clinical mental health counseling, which is what he's doing right now. We're going to poke Dave for some more information later on in the webinar, but I just wanted to give you a sense of where he's coming from. And Judy is the co-executive director of Veterans Helping Veterans now, and she has a lot of nonprofit sector experience in human services and with foster care. She has an undergraduate degree in distributive education, which is a combination of sociology, psychology, and political science, and a master's from the University of Wisconsin. She is married to a Vietnam veteran and is very committed to grassroots organizations. And I'll be asking, and Judy, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about how you got started with this program. And I think at that point you'll probably touch on your husband. So next slide, and over to you.
Great. First of all, this is Judy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening in. Dave and I might be, you may call us eccentric by the end of the webinar. Hopefully it'll just be unique, but eccentric, that's okay. So the big secret of our organization that we're willing to share is that it started very organically. It was only after the fact that it turned out that when we started doing the research, what we were doing ended up being borne out by the research. So the mission, we had 4 veterans hammer out this mission for hours and hours and hours, each one with a different viewpoint, and they came to perfect consensus about our mission of building healthier lives for veterans and their families, reaching out to those who would not be reached, honoring those who served. They realize it's not really grammatical, but they don't want a word of it changed. The goal is to connect veterans who need assistance with volunteer veterans and to address the unmet needs, which are capitalized because we don't want to reinvent the wheel or duplicate services, and to provide information to communities about veterans' needs. This is just applicable to our community in Boulder County and surrounding areas. We believe that Dave and I are going to be talking about what we do, but the real key is how we're doing it, because that's what seems to make us work. What we do is dependent on our locale. And so I believe that the what we do is interesting for you to hear about, but in a way irrelevant to your needs, because this can be done in rural communities, suburban communities, and urban communities. It's what's working for us so well seems to be the how we do it. I guess we can go to the next slide. Dave.
Well, so just to speak a little bit about the what we do, though, we have 4 main areas in which we provide programming, which you can see here. We have educational opportunities in which we invite the entire community. It's never just solely for veterans or family members. We want to make sure that we're recognizing the fact that it is, when we talk about the community, we talk about everybody. There's no exclusion. So our educational opportunities are great ways for the general populace to get a greater understanding about veterans' issues, and also for veterans and family members to find routes to support and understanding about what they're going through. A lot of people have questions that are answered in our educational talks, and we talk about topics from PTSD to traumatic brain injury to suicide issues, substance abuse and alcoholism. We talk about employment and unemployment and homelessness, all these realities of what veterans are facing, especially post-service. We do referral programs. I think as you pointed out earlier, Margie, we try not to duplicate programs. It's really ineffective in the community to be duplicating what other people are doing well. So we've built a lot of relationships around the community with organizations that help with these topics, and we really help act as a hub and a connection center for getting veterans connected to the appropriate person so they can get the best service that they can get. We do a lot of vetting of who we work with, so we ensure that we're giving our clients over to quality and respectful people that can really do the best and offer the best care. Something that we do, I think, is really not unique, but really a core aspect of who we are is our one-on-one support, and that's borne out in multiple ways. We have more formal programs like our transportation program, where we can get veterans to their VA appointments via volunteer drivers. And, yes, that serves the purpose of getting them to their appointment, getting them home, and having that all done. But the volunteer drivers oftentimes are either veterans themselves or people in relation to veterans, so spouses or children of veterans. And it's a really great time, an opportunity to connect with another person in an informal way that allows people to really explore who they are and have a nice, comfortable conversation and not feel like they're kind of burdened by expectation. It's being in a car with somebody for a couple hours is a great way to get to know somebody, and a great way for veterans who, especially with PTSD, who are dealing with isolation issues because they don't want to contact with the world. It's a great way to get them one-on-one contact with another person they might not necessarily meet any other way. And then we have other ways that we do one-on-one. We have some more homebound veterans who get visitation once or twice a month, or sometimes once a week. So somebody comes by, sits down, chats with them, shares stories, takes them out to lunch, stuff like that. So there's a lot of different ways that we enact the one-on-one support. And we have our scheduled programs, and all of our programs throughout are always free to veterans and their family members. There's never a fee attached to them, but our scheduled programs include massage therapy. We have had in the past acupuncturists, and that kind of wavers back and forth depending on availability. We also have therapist-facilitated support groups that deal with the whole gamut of issues, again, PTSD, TBI, substance abuse. And really each group kind of has its own personality, so that it can really address the specific needs of the veterans without fitting them, into like, oh, you have PTSD, you belong in this sort of group. Again, we allow the groups to become organically identified, and we try to fit the people coming into the organization into the appropriate support group. And then we also have social events about once a quarter, where we just kind of have a hangout day where we get together, play games, have food, sorts of things, again, to kind of break that isolation, to bring people together in a space in a way that really fosters healing. So I guess we can go to the next slide.
Okay, 3 main components. In starting this, and what I would suggest might be helpful in people, again, both rural, urban, or suburban, would be you only need 3 components. It could be 1 person, 2 people, or 3, but you need, it's really helpful. It's been great for us to have a veteran with a passion for helping other veterans. And so this is a picture of Ray, who's my husband, who was in Khe Sanh in Vietnam and in a real bad combat situation for a very long time, and struggled for decades with alcoholism and being in and out of jail for DUIs. And when he got better, fortunately about a year before I met him, otherwise he said I never would have put up with him, he changed so much in that time that somebody asked him if he would go visit their grandson, who is a young veteran back from Afghanistan or Iraq, who was in jail for his 2nd DUI and going to be in jail for a year. So that's how the organization started, when Ray tried to visit him and wasn't allowed to visit during non-visiting hours. And he was told as he left in quite a huff, he goes, "Too bad you're not with an organization, or we'd love to have you." And that's what sort of gave him the impetus to start the organization. So 1 person you need is a veteran that would really, if they had their own struggles, they could really lend some understanding to other veterans. And then coupled with somebody, I happen to have nonprofit experience, and then we also had somebody help us. We actually had many somebodies help us who have great awareness of what's going on in Boulder County. And so those are the 3 components. I guess we can go next slide. I'm happy to get the picture of me off of there. So how this started, and again, it started organically, and we only learned in retrospect that it was a reasonable way to do things. We started having monthly meetings. We got a couple people interested, and they brought a couple other people who brought a couple other people, and we started having monthly meetings. I think having key to getting people there was probably we had deli food and cookies and brownies and stuff, potato chips and soda, and we had monthly meetings, and for many of the first few months, it was nothing but people sort of just telling their own stories and talking and getting to know each other, the veterans who had issues getting comfortable, feeling some trust. And that's how we actually started. After about 6 months, we literally started putting up those giant pieces of paper on the wall and getting out magic markers and putting up every need that someone identified, and everything could go up there. And then we started going through them. Well, you don't really need this because so-and-so provides that service. Oh, okay, and then we could add that to our referral list. So that's how we developed the list of priorities. And I think we can go to the next slide. And that's when we really started developing our system. So everything is bottom up. Veterans and family members bring their request to us. And right out of this first meeting came the first group we had was for female family members or friends, anybody with a military connection who is female, because so many women were having terrible problems with being afraid of their husbands waking up in the middle of the night screaming and them not knowing what to do. So what we do is, if something is suggested, we first make sure that it's not available elsewhere. If it is, we vet it and, to use a phrase, and put it on our referral list. And then if the program doesn't exist, we really look at if we have the internal capacity to do it. And there's still a couple things we want to do that we're just building enough internal capacity to be doing it, which is what our VISTA volunteers are helping us do. And then if we can do it, we study the best ways to do it, get a lot of advice, make sure we have the money for at least 6 months to do it, and then we start the program. Okay, next slide would be Data Day. So we developed some core values, staff and board, with a lot of input from a lot of people. And again, this is part of the key that I think makes it work. And Dave, just signal me and jump on in when you want to talk about inclusive. We try and have as few rules as possible. One of the veterans once said to us, if a veteran walks in here and they're handed a clipboard to fill out forms, they're out of here. And so we try to not have any rules. Therefore, if somebody comes and they're not from Boulder County, but they're a veteran or family member, that's fine. If they were combat or not combat, we don't care. We don't care what their discharge status is. We've had, colonels who'd been in for 30 years, and we've had people who went AWOL after 30 days. And if they served in the military, that's fine with us. Accessible, we try and be accessible in every way, including a wheelchair ramp, including things like the phone. If you call us on the phone, you'll either get a person to answer or it'll say the phone is busy, please call back, or leave a number. You won't have anyone saying, please call 227 if you want to talk to the program person, please do, because so many of our clients just wouldn't be able to handle that. Safe? Yeah, jump in with anything. Or
sure, I can talk about safe. I think a huge part of being safe, we're a sober environment, so no drugs, alcohol ever allowed in our programs or our space, but also no weapons. We come here, people come here to feel comfortable and welcome at home. You can notice some of the pictures, like on this slide in the upper left-hand corner, that's actually our space. It's a nice little Victorian-style house, and we want it to be a welcoming home environment, so it kind of rolls safe into welcoming. But I think they go hand in hand.
And in fact, we take that so seriously that the decor of the place was actually debated on several different occasions by a group of veterans. excuse me, and some of the veterans wanted the place to look very military and hang flags from battalions or whatever and have all sorts of POW flags, but the majority of veterans did not want that. They wanted it to look more like a home or a coffee shop than an institutional place or a dentist's office. So the drop-in center is very welcoming.
I don't know, do you want us to continue on the values piece? I forget what the rest of it is. So, and that all kind of leads into the healing piece. The primary, outcome that we have is the healing of veterans and the support of veterans and family members. And without having that as a core value, we might lose track of that. So that's included in there just to illustrate the fact that everything we do, I think, speaks to the outcome of healthier lives. And, that's in our mission, building healthier lives for veterans and their families. We're volunteer-based. So as Judy said before, we're grassroots, we're organic from the ground up, and a huge part of that, I think, is being volunteer-based so that, we don't get overwhelmed by the notion of having a big staff and the notion of having a lot of, executive-type people walking around saying what's important. Rather, we have our volunteers come in and they bring with them the unique skills and tools and really the compassion to work with veterans or actually being a veteran, that really is the foundation of how our programs operate.
And for those of you who like stats, about 75% of our volunteers are also clients. And one of the secrets of how we often get clients that might be, we say we reach out to those who would not be reached, is if somebody seems not so interested in our services, we may say, okay, that's fine, but could you help us set up these tables for this luncheon we're having tomorrow? And veterans, of course, are so wonderful about helping other people, maybe minimizing their own needs, but so interested in helping other people that they always go, oh, sure. And that's how we really have, especially with the younger veterans, that's how we've really reached so many younger veterans.
Yeah, and all these things work towards the idea of building community, but as a value, we want to make sure that we're constantly building community. And like I spoke to before, community doesn't just necessarily mean a community of veterans or community of veterans and family members. We're really trying to foster community across the whole. So yeah, for us, the foundation is we're focusing on veterans, we're focusing on veterans and family members, and really strengthening that community, because in the end, having a strong veteran community, I really think, strengthens the community as a whole. Veterans are found in every walk of life, in every level of the socioeconomic status, and they, by having a strong, integrated veteran community with healthy, positive veterans, we strengthen ourselves as a society. So, the small piece, we work with veterans and family members. The large piece, we're doing that, for the betterment of really everyone around.
And there's just two more little pieces I want to say about this. Besides taking a look at wanting to heal some of the struggles that veterans and family members go through, including certainly secondary trauma to family members, we're very interested in looking at the strengths and skills of veterans, and that's why our volunteers are so fabulous. Not being a veteran myself, and until I met Ray, having no background with veterans at all, I have just been blown away by how fabulous veterans are at things like working as a team, completing the mission, solving difficult problems, and it's awesome. So it's not just working on the struggles, it's also really utilizing the strength and experience. The last point I want to make about this is apolitical. We have, our veterans, I'd say 25% have really strong leanings to the right. 25% probably have really strong leanings to the left. And there's about 50% in the middle who do not want to hear about politics at all. So we are very devotedly apolitical, even though individual clients, volunteers, and staff members may have all sorts of politics. We really stay neutral about political discussions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably go to the next. I think we've beaten the organic thing.
Yeah. Okay. I have to take my glasses off to read this. All right, so these, to me, these are some of the real key things, and Dave and I will just talk about it. Dave, hit me or give me a look or something if you want to talk. But we really work at being bottom-up rather than top-down, and I have to say the one time when I really goofed that up is I had learned about how fabulous acupressure self-management is, and I thought it would be wonderful. I already know it's great for traumatic brain injury, but I thought it might be good for PTSD and alcoholism and chronic pain, for which we have a lot of clients who suffer those things. And I really pushed for an acupressure self-management program, which we got, and we got funding. And I've been driving staff crazy to try and get people to complete it. And so that was something I tried to do from top down rather than have it percolate bottom up, and it did not work. So, the ongoing?
Yeah, so, you know, we're constantly reflecting on what's going on. I think, Margie, in the beginning of this, you mentioned the loop, the learning loop, and that's exactly what we try to implement in the way we operate, is that we're constantly taking input from veterans and family members around what the needs are, and constantly like reflecting on how we're offering our programs to make sure that we are hitting the needs as appropriately as possible. We're not duplicating services, and that we're growing in our understanding of how to do the job. We also have, you know, at least 50% of our board has to be veterans or family members, so that we maintain that integrity of being a veteran organization. There's something I haven't said yet, but peer-to-peer is something that's really big with the way we build community as well, because that's the best way to really get people to understand, is if you're talking to somebody who's already experienced it. So as an organization, for us to really understand, we need to make sure that we're comprising ourselves mostly of veterans or family members who have that firsthand experience of what, you know, what the needs really are and what the experience really is like to be a veteran or be in relation to a veteran.
And I want to add one thing. One thing that's, one may again say, quirky or eccentric or unique about us is our programs may change. And one of the things we like about the way we're doing things is that we have flexibility built into it. Like right now, we feel pretty good about how we're covering transportation and how we're covering the needs of veterans who have alcoholism and PTSD issues and isolation issues and all that with the support groups and the center itself and all that. We're seeing an ever-increasing number of people come in who are just somehow falling in between the cracks in social services and money and jobs and all that, and we're starting to take a stronger look at what we can do about that and how we can fit into what else is going on. So it's always an emerging situation.
Yeah, so we can go to the next slide, I think.
So these are just, you know, stats. We did start in December of 2007. We have grown about 30% each year. We did increase by 45% to 433 clients with about 7,800 hours of services in 2012. And then these stats, for the support groups, we do a much more in-depth survey than we would say for we also do a survey for the transportation clients, but obviously we're not looking for big changes. We're looking for if they're happy they got where they wanted to be. But these are some of the statistics, and we had somebody who was a PhD in it with evaluation skills help us develop our criteria for the outcomes.
Maybe next slide. Oh, fun. I get to talk about myself.
Great. Thank you. Well, one of the things that we said in the very beginning was that we have the opportunity to talk to Dave, who is a VISTA and who was a vet. And so I'm going to ask Dave to talk about, well, first of all, I want you to talk about the work that you do in capacity building with Veterans Helping Veterans Now. And then we're going to dive deeper into your own story and help people to make some connections between that and their own efforts to recruit veterans. So, Dave, tell us a little bit about what you do for Veterans Helping Veterans Now. What's your role?
Sure. So a big part of my role is volunteer coordination. So I do a lot of recruitment and retention, as the slide is saying, so conveniently. And that, for me, we have two VISTAs here. Let me start with that here at Veterans Helping Veterans Now. for me, my goal of capacity building is more in the capacity of people. So whereas our other VISTA spends a little bit more time working with the actual dollars and cents. So what I do some outreach with getting out to the community, getting the word out about Veterans Helping Veterans Now, who we are, what we do, trying to draw interest from the veterans in the community who might not have heard about us yet. What that looks like a lot of times is going to the local universities. We've got the University of Colorado in Boulder, here in Boulder County. We've got Front Range Community College. So making sure I keep connected with them, with the veterans in their programs. I also go to the senior residents. There's a lot of veterans in these residences that are, they're looking for something to do with their time, and we can always use somebody answering phones or doing something like that. And again, by bringing in veterans to help out, we also enable them to engage in the programs and hopefully ultimately get a benefit at the end. I work really closely with our program director in creating new programs, vetting programs that are suggested to us. As I think Judy alluded to a few times already, we do a lot of research to make sure the programs we have are non-duplicative, that we actually have the resources and the ability to effectively enable and act those programs so that we don't create something that suddenly we can't handle and we lose something that could be valuable. So I work with our program director on that. And again, when I do that, a lot of it is towards what can we do to, again, hit the needs of the veterans in the area, and also how can we do this in a way that really hits the skills that our volunteers are bringing, so that our volunteers ideally can be the ones to maintain the programs and make them sustainable, so that it's not falling on the burden of the few staff members we have here to maintain all the different things that we're trying to do. And then being a veteran staff member, I think is a huge part of my role here. We have a lot of people come in and, with veterans, with anybody really in a situation in life where they might feel lost or confused or scared, having some level of immediate connection is really powerful. So being a veteran myself allows that immediate connection for anybody who's unsure, uncertain, or just a little bit hesitant or wary. I think just having that immediately allows for there to be a rapport. It also allows me to get out and meet with these other organizations around Boulder County and the surrounding area, and have a little bit of just authenticity in my place in the organization. Our name, Veterans Helping Veterans Now, it really speaks to who we are and what we do. And if it wasn't a veteran reaching out, it might be a little bit harder to show authenticity in the organization. So I think that's something I didn't really have to work at doing. I did all the work years ago when I joined the Marine Corps, but it's been a great benefit to really building relationship and building rapport with the community and the veterans within the community. So guide me along if there's anything I'm missing here.
Sure. No, that's great. So do you think you would be as successful if you were not a veteran yourself?
I think, knowing myself, I'd probably slowly put the energy in, and I would.
Right.
I do think that there is a certain aspect of being a veteran that that does lend itself to the successes that I've had. That I don't know if they'd be quite the same qualitative successes if I didn't have that. It is truly, and not to scare away people who aren't veterans. I don't want people to worry that who aren't a veteran, who aren't, because I've spent a lot of time consoling those who want to volunteer but don't feel like they're legitimately should be connected because they don't have any direct connection. It does help out. It makes things easier for me, but it does not mean that it's not the end-all be-all. I think an open heart, passionate mind, and the ability to really understand trump anything else. So it is something that's benefited me, but it's not a necessity.
Great. Thank you. And Debbie Evans has actually given us a link to some military culture training, and you'll also find some of that on the National Service Resource Center when we get to that slide. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience as a VISTA, because we don't always have the opportunity to talk to a VISTA member who's a vet, And tell us about how you got involved, and maybe we could go back to that slide that shows you with your Outward Bound stuff.
Sure, because that's definitely how I ended up in this position. My route to VISTA was kind of roundabout, I guess. I came out to Colorado initially after my time in the Marine Corps with the intention of getting into outdoor education, and that's where I ended up getting my associate's degree in outdoor education, pursuing that, working for Outward Bound for a good part of 8 years and some other organizations. I never really thought of myself as being connected with veterans again or being connected with a volunteer organization. What had happened is towards the last couple of years I was working at Outward Bound and realizing that there were other things I wanted to do with my life, and being in a bit of a state of transition. Outward Bound had, through some funding, it got created a program for Iraq and Afghanistan vets that offered free courses that were roughly a week in length. They varied by a day or two here and there, but roughly a week. And I got to work about 10 or so of those courses over the course of 2 years, which really put me back in connection with veterans, which, at a time in my life where I was trying to figure out how to really have meaning in the next phase of my life, I put 2 and 2 together and realized reconnecting with a veteran population would be the way to go. So I kind of left the whole outdoor education thing behind and started wipe my slate clean and try to rewrite. So I cast a wide net, looked around, pretty much told everybody I met that I was working on getting into counseling and working with veterans. And I was lucky enough to get through a coworker at another job previous to this, connected with Veterans Helping Veterans Now as an opportunity to volunteer. I had some free time and I just wanted to give my services in any way I could. So I came to Veterans Helping Veterans Now as a volunteer, just volunteering what time I had, which ended up looking like leading hikes, taking advantage of my particular skill set. So leading hikes in the Boulder County area for veterans. I also got involved with one of the support groups, and I really found a lot of integrity in the organization that I appreciated and respected. And when there was an opportunity when the VISTA was leaving his assignment and there was an opportunity to kind of dive in, I felt like it would be a great choice for me to really get the experience I needed in a way that I might not be able to do more. I don't really have all the qualifications to be staying in office after leaving 8 years of outdoor education, but the VISTA program was kind of an open door for me to really get my foot in the door on multiple levels for multiple things for myself, but also to continue to serve, because that's kind of been a trend throughout my life. You can see Marine Corps service, and then I even consider my time at Outward Bound, since I didn't get paid all that well, as service to society and others. So it's been a theme in my life.
Okay. Thank you. And Dave, when you got to Veterans Helping Veterans Now as a volunteer, how did they know that you could lead hikes?
Well, I sat down with our program director, who's the person I work with really closely right now, and I basically said, hey, I have free time, I want to volunteer, what do you need? And she said, well, what can you do? I was like, well, I can do all sorts of things, I don't know. She's like, well, what sort of skills do you have? I was like, well, I've been leading outdoor trips for a while, and she's like, would you be willing to consider doing that? So it was really, her drawing out of me what my skill set was, and I'm always looking for a chance to get outside, so to have a way to combine that with volunteering, I was perfectly content to do.
So it sounds like they were able to tap into one of your strengths and your past experience instead of slotting you into a hole because they needed somebody to stuff envelopes or to make the coffee or be the greeter or something like that. That you came in through something that you were passionate about, and it sounds as if it was what we sometimes say with volunteers is if you come in, if you bring people in for episodic or occasional volunteering, they get their feet in the door and they have a chance to see what it's like, and then they're more likely to turn around and become a VISTA or a full-time volunteer or an AmeriCorps member or a Senior Corps member. And I think what you've described plays that out.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So let's go on to the next slide. And let's go back to the volunteer piece, because that was an important part of the capacity building of your organization. Talk to me a little bit about how you've coordinated volunteers, what you've done to make it successful, and to mirror this process of information gathering and asset development.
Yeah, so there are a few different things, and I'll start a little bit smaller and end with maybe a bigger program that I've been doing. So on a smaller scale, again, I mirror my own experience coming in as a volunteer, so I always sit down with the volunteers and ask what skills they bring and what they're capable of offering or willing to offer based off those skills. And so what I do with that then is I've got volunteers, getting connected to the transportation programs. If I have volunteers that really just want to connect with somebody and be able to talk with somebody, that's a great way to do it. And I've already spoke to that before about that one-on-one. Or else we have volunteers who actually do come in and they understand the ins and outs of nonprofit work, the world, and what it takes to run one, and how understaffed we typically are. So they do say, hey, I have these computer skills and this sort of office type skill, and are completely willing to do that. So again, trying not to put them in a spot, but to find something that fits them. I think one of the bigger examples of how I've utilized volunteers is all of our wellness programs, so our massage therapy, our acupuncture therapy, those are all also volunteer-based. Those therapists do not get paid right now for their time. And what we did was, in my outreach, I recognized that we had a significant portion of interested parties that couldn't necessarily make it to our drop-in center, a lot of them being senior and being homebound. So we've created a way to reach out to them by taking our volunteers on the road. And I've been working in conjunction with one of our bodywork volunteers who is trying to build our bodywork program so that she can kind of take this on after I leave. But taking our massage therapists or acupuncturist therapists away from our drop-in center to areas that are more accessible to those that might not have the means to make it all the way to where we are. And offer their services on a larger scale.
So as a takeaway, you've been able to bring services to folks who are homebound or who can't make it to you, and that's something that would apply to other programs no matter what their services are, kind of like Meals on Wheels or some of the other services that we have, and the transportation services we have too, to bring our veterans and others to their medical appointments or to your centers so that they can interact with others. Here's, I'd like to go, thank you so much. Let's go to the next slide.
Margie, also we got a question from Debbie Evans for Dave that says, how do you train your volunteers that aren't veterans to be sensitive to veterans and their families?
Thank you. Good question.
Well, that is a really good question. And I alluded to that a little bit, I think, earlier in just speaking to the fact that, it doesn't really take a unique skill set to work with veterans. It really takes understanding the fact that, we're human beings and it's a human experience. And that's one of the biggest things I do when I talk to volunteers who aren't veterans or don't have any connection to veterans through, being, the daughter, mother, son, brother, whatnot. Really trying to give them the understanding that it comes from a human place and that their willingness to engage is going to be seen as a benefit, as a positive. And their confidence and their comfort with themselves is key in working with veterans and family members of veterans. So it's more assuaging the apprehensions that they have than an actual training piece.
We also go over some materials that may be a little more specific, like to make sure that if they're meeting with the vet. Well, first of all, we background check anyone that works directly with the client or works with sensitive material. But things like, say they're meeting somebody at a coffee shop and they realize that the veteran has a weapon with them? You know, I mean, none of this stuff has ever happened, but we have pre-anticipated any of this, or if somebody is drunk when they meet them, what the procedure would be, and if somebody asks them to loan them $500, what the procedure would be. So we try and do as much of that potential troubleshooting. I will say it's never actually come up, but we want to make sure that people have comfort.
Yeah, we do have a general training for all our volunteers that incorporates setting healthy boundaries, working in alignment with the values and the mission of the organization, and also how to relate. So a lot of our resources in our training do revolve around relations. So for veterans, or for people who aren't veterans, or for veterans themselves, you know, sometimes it's hard to understand what's really appropriate. So we do have like how to use self-disclosure so you can help build rapport with the people you're working with, how to establish healthy boundaries, how to deal with you know, emergent situations. So we have a whole list of contacts and supports in case, you know, specific situations come up, either legal or medical or whatnot. So we do cover all the ins and outs of the typical type of training, but that's across the board for everybody.
Thank you very much. Now, Dave, let me ask you this. What advice would you give to projects looking to serve veterans or to projects that are trying to recruit veterans?
I'll speak to serve, and Dave can speak to recruit. Maybe to serve, I would say the very best thing that anyone can do who wants to serve veterans is to get a bunch of them together and just start talking to them and let them tell you. That's just, you know, just let them tell their stories. You know, what are you not getting? Those sorts of things, and that's to me the very most important thing.
Yeah, and for recruiting veterans, I think it's really important to engage them in the organization. So making sure that when you're speaking to veterans, and you give them a tangible kind of outcome. You know, a lot of veterans, we work in a world where we can see the results of what we were doing, and by speaking to that can really help draw people in, and then you can kind of work on the softer interpersonal things afterwards. But engaging them, showing them, bringing them back into the fold, so to speak, into the community is another great way, and offering a community, you know, that kind of honors who they are. So, and you're going to find a whole gamut of veterans. There are veterans who don't really connect very much with their service after they leave, or it takes them a little bit while. Like for myself, I for 10 years kind of skirted around the fact that I was a veteran. So to speak to me, it was more like I was needed. To say, Dave, you are needed to help, was probably the best way to get me to come in. Now, some people really like to reconnect with veteran population. So it's going to be, you know, you have to read your person that you're working with on a one-on-one basis. So honoring them.
Were you asking specifically about recruiting veterans for AmeriCorps VISTA, or recruiting veterans to be clients? Because those are
actually both, because we've heard both as being issues for folks.
So I have a couple of small, quick things to add. Part of it depends on your population. If, for example, you're looking for veterans, say, who have alcohol issues, you might want to make up a bunch of matchbooks. This is something we did with your logo and phone number on it, and take it to a lot of local bars or 7-Elevens or places where people might come in and ask for matches. That's one thing we do for that population. If I were looking for a VISTA member who is a veteran, I would go to the colleges and find the veteran liaison at each school and ask them if they would send out an email, post an email to all their veteran clients about the AmeriCorps VISTA position, and say on it that veterans would really be encouraged.
Yeah,
that's very helpful. And I just have one final question. Judy, is there anything you know now that you wish you'd known when you started?
Anything I know now? I wish I would have just had more trust and cool my jets that everything emerges on its own as it should if you give it the time to do it. I would get ahead of myself. too often rather than just slowing down and listening to what the veterans around me were saying. They have the wisdom, I don't. I guess one other thing I'll say is a lot of veterans that you engage as volunteers don't necessarily want to know about the real infrastructure issues or the paperwork stuff that has to be done. They just want to get out there and help other veterans. So we do try and keep our veterans who don't like that stuff away from having to have that hassle of it. So I say that's something I wish I would have paid more attention to at the beginning. I would have saved some veterans some hassle, I think.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of things that I'm taking away from this. In no particular order, I'm hearing that vets vary. All vets are not the same. All of their needs, issues, and strengths are not the same. And it's important to have a representation of your group, a representative sampling of your group when you're making some of the decisions about who you're going to serve and what you're going to do. You need to identifying needs and assets is an ongoing process. It's not something that just happens at the beginning. And it sounds like in your program, you try to integrate that within each aspect of your program. So for example, if you have a new idea, you try to vet that idea and get a sense of its viability. Or if you're a volunteer, you try to find out the strengths and the needs of your volunteers. Because I saw, for example, that you have a nice volunteer satisfaction survey up at the top there. And maybe we could click on that. It's an attachment. Yeah, there you go. So if you scroll down on this, you'll see that it's not just some questions about the volunteer work, but it's some more ongoing development or continuous improvement, as we refer to it. One of the other things I'm taking away is that trust takes time, that you brought people together, and over time you began to look at what's needed and what's available, that it wasn't something you just brought strangers together and expected to have results immediately. And most important, I think, is that what you've tried to do is really to engage the people that you're serving within all aspects of your organization and your project. So within the board, within the your kind of advisory groups, within your volunteer groups, these are all folks that are coming that are being served as well as serving. So it's that two-sided thing. So as we close, I'd like to just refer to you to a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much, Dave and Judy. And I wanted to reassure everyone that all of the ideas in the chat will be posted, and we will also answer those questions for you. And some of them will post on the Knowledge Network so you can continue the discussion. If you haven't already been there, I recommend strongly that you go to the Veterans and Military Families Knowledge Network, which is our resource dissemination strategy and our way we find out from you what's going on. This is the homepage of the Veterans Network, and you can see that on the right-hand side are the future webinars coming up. This is where you can sign up. It's also where you can go to past webinars. There are documents here that you can post yourself. For example, some of you have said that you've done an assessment, you've met this group, you've done that. Post your agendas, post your needs assessments. Let's share them with one another so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then we also have some program practices and examples here. At the very top where it says latest discussion, this is where we have ongoing conversations. So for example, we will post the questions here from the chat function to see what kinds of things you all say, because just as you gather information from the people you serve in Veterans Helping Veterans Now, we are doing the same thing here at the corporation. Okay, so next slide, please. And for those of you who are looking for more information around performance measurement and program design, I wanted to point out this page, which is the home page of all of the agency's knowledge networks. So you can see there's one for veterans and military families, one for education, and then on the far right, you'll see there's actually one for performance measurement. Now, if you were to click on the performance measurement one, can you go to the next slide, please? You would see that there's a whole curriculum and resources. Some of them are very general. but they all have examples about all of the areas of service that the corporation is engaged in. So some are education, some are around veterans, some are around independent living, and so forth. Okay, so this is an important resource for you, and I strongly suggest, for example, if you are looking at data collection, there's some great tools here, great examples of how to create a useful survey. I just can't underscore enough how helpful this section is. So, identifying local needs. Next slide, please. It's really about making your program real, finding and identifying the folks that you're going to be serving with and serving directly. It helps you to narrow your focus and concentrate so that you can then identify the interventions that are research-based and evidence-based that will support and get things done for the folks you're serving. And in the end, it actually will go back and loop around to your outcomes, because if you don't know who you're serving and how you're serving them, you won't be able to identify if you're meeting that need and you're being successful. So it's this kind of continuous loop of focusing on who you're working with, identifying what their needs are and what the scope of the issues are, and then finding the evidence-based interventions or practices that can help them, and then documenting that. Starting out right is really important. And I don't know if you guys had this, but my mom used to say, well begun is half done. And doing a very thorough needs assessment using multiple strategies that focuses on either the key stakeholders in your community or the key stakeholders and your target population will go a very long way to help you set yourself on the right track. So with that, I'd like to just remind you about the next session on this webinar series, which is beginning with the end in mind, a deep dive into performance measurement for veteran and military family programs, and that's on May 29th. So thank you very much, everyone. We will take the questions that have appeared in the chat on the right, and we'll make sure they get posted on the Knowledge Network for discussion and response. And Debbie, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close off?
No, I just wanted to thank everybody and let them know that the evaluation will pop up on their screen right after the WebEx evaluation. And if they could please give us any feedback that helps us make all our webinars better for them. As you said, the chat will edit the chat and get any of their questions answered that we can, and we'll get that posted on the Knowledge Network along with the recording and the transcript as soon as those are available. And there were a couple extra questions in the chat panel that didn't get answered, and I'll try to run them by both Judy and Dave and see if we can get a couple extra answers to those and post those within our chat as well. So I think that's all.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll sign out. Thank you, everybody.
Bye now. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.